This weekend, American and Chinese officials are quietly meeting in a neutral location to begin exploratory discussions about the mess they've gotten themselves into on trade, or more specifically, the mess that Donald Trump has gotten them into.
China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs.
And the fact that Trump is showing public signs of, you could only call it panic about that mess. It was undermining America's position even before those talks began. So let's discuss a quick recap first of the background. When President Trump slapped massive tariffs onto China during his major tariff frenzy on April the 2nd this year, by all accounts, he was expecting that China, along with everyone else, would come immediately to his door seeking a deal.
These countries are calling us up, kissing my ass. They are dying to make a deal. Please, sir, make a deal.
Well, they didn't. Instead, they reciprocated with tariffs of their own, and both sides escalated the tariff rates in reaction to each other until they reached a de facto trade ban, at least for most types of goods between them. Trump kept saying that he was waiting for Chinese President Xi Jinping to call him on the phone. But China was clear they would not call him. Losing face and showing weakness are so anathema to the culture, it would have been unthinkable for them to do so. At the same time, Trump has an ego the size of the planet, of course, and having predicted that China would call him, and having already lied to the world that Xi Jinping had already called him, which was not backed up by his own team, never mind China's vociferous denials, well, they had reached something of a standoff. Now, since neither leader will call the other in any high-profile kind of way, it's defaulting down to second-level senior officials to have a discussion about how do we dig ourselves out of this. After all, it's in the interests of neither party that their borders should de facto remain totally closed to each other. From China's point of view, they say, that's true, but you did this to us. As the Chinese saying goes, he who tied the bell should be the one to untie it. Trump's plan was wallop. I hit you with pain. Now come to talk to me about the terms by which I will relieve that pain. China's response has been, you just unilaterally and for no good reason inflicted pain. So stop doing that. Maybe then we could talk. While both countries are showing signs of how that pain is being felt, China does have a number of factors strengthening its hand in any discussions with the United States. So 1. This was done to it by one of its main competitors. It's much easier, therefore, for the Chinese leadership to rally its population to withstand the short-term pain as it fights back. External attacks tend to unify people. The United States, on the other hand, entirely did this to itself. So while Trump's MAGA movement will support whatever he does, at least unless he refuses to release the Epstein files or something like that, America more broadly, and particularly American markets and business, are not so impressed. 2. While it is feeling pain, nevertheless, China reported strong export growth in April, rising 8.1% in dollar terms year on year, significantly beating expectations. Now that reflects that it has had some success in diverting trade flows to other regions, with Southeast Asia and Europe leading the charge. It's certain that some of that, but by no means all of it, is to be found in short-term fixes, whereby Chinese goods are still finding their way to the United States just via third-party countries, and hence with higher costs attached to them. Just nowhere near as high as if they'd come direct from China. So China is feeling that it is more financially resilient right now compared to America, which is showing significant paralysis in how it deals with all of this in the short term. And 3, Xi Jinping has been preparing for precisely this move for a number of years, certainly since Trump's first term. China has had a vision and a plan for itself in the world to replace the United States as the preeminent global power. Xi Jinping has been following his economic program of state-led industrial development, his pursuit of technological dominance, and that's a long-term plan which he won't simply abandon. So he has been taking advantage of Trump's tariff chaos, aimed as it was at the entire world, to further that agenda. China has been drawing other countries, including former American allies who have been burned by Trump, precisely because their trust of America had left them vulnerable. Beijing has held a consistent position with iron discipline around its messaging. That has been that China won't bow to American pressure, won't permit itself to be humiliated by Trump. Such message discipline has hardly been similarly to be found on the American side. Trump has been talking about how Xi only had to call, about how he really expected to be doing a deal with China any day soon, then demonstrably lying about how Xi had already called, a statement that could only ever infuriate the Chinese and make it even harder to make progress. Nevertheless, back-channel discussions between the two sides have been exploring how they might dig their way out of the impasse that had been created. They agreed that two groups of their senior people would be coincidentally passing through Switzerland at the same time, so naturally they might as well sit down together for the whole weekend, utterly spontaneous-like. Then, as the US team, led by Scott Bessent, were literally on their way to those talks, Trump blurted out that he would be inclined to consider reducing the tariff on China down to 80%. Very much gave the appearance that the American side is the one that's more desperate for the deal, that Trump is somewhat panicking, which of course significantly weakens their hand. Now maybe that's wrong, maybe the Chinese side are secretly more desperate, but they're obviously a lot more consistent and careful about hiding it, so it remains a secret. And indeed, it headed into the weekend with a strong statement, in stark contrast with the Trump act of public self-negotiation. In advance of the exploratory talks taking place, which China says was requested by the US side, it said that it was willing to walk away from any talks if the US continues its use of coercion and extortion, because on principle China will not submit to such tactics. On the other side, other countries that have been engaged with the Trump administration on tariff trade negotiations have commonly reported that those talks have been going slowly. And the reason they give for that is that, at least partly, because the Trump team seems to have no idea what they actually want to achieve out of any such deals. If you add that lack of a plan or even a purpose to the fact that Trump continues to overestimate the leverage that he has against the whole of the rest of the world, as put into words by Trump when he said, "I own the store and I set the prices and I'll say, if you want to shop here, this is what you have to pay." China knows, however, that it possesses a near monopoly in extracting and refining rare earth minerals, and particularly rare earth magnets, without which even Elon Musk can't build his intended fleet of robots. So it's no surprise that analysts expect China to propose to the US that it should remove all of its 145% tariffs on Chinese goods. The Chinese delegation is led by Vice Premier He Lifeng, a close associate of Xi Jinping, which is key because the decisions on both sides are ultimately going to devolve to the leaders. He is described as an able negotiator, friendly but confident and somewhat aloof. He faces, of course, Scott Bessent, who himself is seen as the more competent face of the administration, but of course he is hampered always by the knowledge that he could be undercut at any point by some left-of-field announcement by his capricious boss. Analysts are describing this meeting in Switzerland as merely pre-negotiation, trying to map out what needs to happen to make any substantive talks possible. As they sit down together, there is deep mistrust and antipathy between the two sides. And this won't be helped if both sides are going in sincerely confident that they hold the strongest hand and the other side is desperate. So, what can we expect that they will have been discussing? The US side will want to see increased market access for American products in China to address that trade imbalance that Trump is so fixated on. It may touch on the releasing of rare earth minerals and magnets again for export, also probably issues with the fentanyl trade. The Chinese side will likely say, remove your tariffs. We will then remove ours, and then we can talk about all this other stuff. Now, that will give Trump a problem, because it's kind of hard to spin that in any way that doesn't look like a humiliating retreat. I mean, I don't know if the talks might come up with some innovative suggestion on how to organise a face-saving formula. I personally can't think what on earth that could be, but they're all going to be highly motivated to come up with something. So, necessity being the mother of invention and all that. If Trump and his team can't bring themselves to do that, or they just walk away from the talks in a huff because the Chinese are not being as compliant as they think they should be, and they still think that they have the strongest cards, well, then I would expect that China will be relatively content, publicly content, to let him sweat it out longer, probably calculating that the concrete evidence of problems will very soon be becoming highly visible to the American consumer, and that will change the dynamics enormously. The world probably deserves serious discussions and considerations between the existing world power and the rising rival superpower. As it is, what we've really got is just one big high-stakes game of chicken.